My mom claimed my $75,000 was family money, so I showed her who legally owned it. It wasn't about the money itself, not really. It was about the look on her face, the sheer, unadulterated disbelief when she realized I wasn't backing down. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of day where the sky had that bruised, almost purple quality, threatening rain but holding back. I was supposed to be packing for Thanksgiving at my Aunt Carol's, the usual chaotic affair with too much food, forced cheer, and my dad's droning stories about his golf game. Instead, I was sitting at my kitchen island, a half-empty mug of lukewarm coffee in front of me, staring at the spreadsheet I had painstakingly put together. My parents, bless their hearts, were a generation that believed family money was some amorphous blob of cash that belonged to whoever was currently holding the purse strings, which in their minds was always them. I'd been saving for a down payment on a small condo for months, years actually. I worked hard, lived frugally, and every dollar was accounted for. It was a disciplined, almost monastic existence. Late nights at the firm, skipping happy hours, making my own lunch every single day. It added up. I'd finally hit that magic number, the one that felt like freedom, $75,000. Enough for a modest place in a decent neighborhood, a place that would be mine, truly mine. No roommates, no sharing, just mine. The plan was to surprise my parents with the news, maybe ask them for some pointers on mortgages. I imagined a proud nod from Dad, a teary hug from Mom. That was my naive 28-year-old self talking, the self who hadn't yet encountered the full, breathtaking force of familial entitlement. It started innocuously enough, as these things always do. Mom called while I was at work. "Honey, can you swing by tonight? I need to talk to you about something important." Her voice had that slightly saccharine lilt, the one that meant she was about to ask for a favor or deliver some mild form of guilt. "Sure, Mom, everything okay?" "Oh, just things. Your father and I, we've been discussing some investments, and we thought you might be able to help us out." That should have been my first clue. Help them out. Usually it was the other way around. I'd help them with their taxes, fix their computer, driven them to appointments. Now I was the one being asked to help out with investments. I drove home, the usual traffic snaking around the highways, my mind buzzing with 100 different scenarios. Maybe they wanted me to look over some stock picks. Maybe they were thinking of starting a new business. When I walked in, the house smelled of pot roast and something vaguely floral. Dad was in his usual armchair watching the news, a half-finished crossword puzzle on his lap. Mom was bustling in the kitchen, her movements a little too energetic, her smile a little too wide. "There you are, darling. Come sit.
We have some exciting news." Exciting news usually involved someone getting married, a new grandchild, or a promotion. I took a seat at the dining room table, the polished mahogany gleaming under the dim overhead light. Mom placed a plate of perfectly roasted potatoes in front of me and sat down, her hands clasped. Dad switched off the TV and turned his full attention to me. "So," Mom began, her eyes sparkling, "your father and I have been doing some reevaluating of our financial situation." This was already veering into territory I didn't understand. They lived comfortably, always had. Dad had a good pension from the company he'd retired from years ago, and Mom had always managed the household finances impeccably. They weren't struggling. "We've decided," Dad chimed in, his voice a low rumble, "to make a significant investment, something that will secure our future, and, by extension, the family's future. We've been looking at a few things," Mom continued, leaning forward conspiratorially, "and we've come across a fantastic opportunity. It requires a substantial initial outlay, of course, and that's where we were hoping you could contribute." My stomach did a slow flip. "Contribute? Mom, Dad, I don't understand. What kind of investment are we talking about?" Mom waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, you know, property, some diversified ventures. The details aren't important right now. What is important is the capital." She paused, her gaze locking with mine, and for the first time I saw a hint of expectation. Not just hope, but a solid, unwavering expectation. "We're looking for about $75,000, she said, as casually as if she were asking me to pick up milk. The air left my lungs in a rush. $75,000. The exact amount I had painstakingly saved for my condo. The amount that represented my independence, my escape hatch, my future. I felt a cold dread seep into my veins. 75,000? I stammered, my voice barely a whisper.
Mom, where would I even get that kind of money? Dad chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. Oh, come now, Sarah. We know you've been saving. You're always so good with your money. We've seen your little bank statements. You've got it, don't you? My mind reeled. They'd been looking at my bank statements? My personal savings? Mom, Dad, that's for my down payment, for my own place. Mom's smile faltered, replaced by a look of mild annoyance. Your down payment? Honey, that's not a sensible thing to be doing right now, not with the way the market is. Besides, she leaned in again, lowering her voice. That money, in a way, is family money. We've supported you your whole life. This is just a reallocation, a smart investment for all of us. Family money? The words echoed in my head, tasting like ash. How is it family money? I earned it. I saved it. I worked for it. Dad sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. Sarah, you're being difficult.
We are your parents. We know what's best. This is a unique opportunity, a chance to really make our money work for us and for you. When this investment pays off, you'll get your share and more. You'll be able to buy a much nicer place then. But I need it now, I said, my voice rising, a tremor of anger starting to snake through me. I've been planning this for years. I found a place I love. This is my chance. Mom's expression hardened. And we are your family. Your father and I have always put this family first. We've sacrificed, we've provided. And now, when we have a chance to secure our future and yours, you're going to be selfish and hold back? Selfish. The word hit me like a physical blow. Me? Selfish? I was the responsible one, the one who always helped out, the one who never asked for much. This isn't about being selfish, I said, trying to keep my voice even, but failing. This is about what's mine. You can't just claim my savings. That's not how it works. Oh, but it is, Dad said, his tone turning cold. When it comes to family, certain things are understood. We provided the foundation, the home you grew up in, the education. This is just the next step, a contribution to the family's continued prosperity. I stood up, my legs feeling shaky. The pot roast suddenly seemed heavy, suffocating. I can't do this right now. I need to think. There's nothing to think about, Sarah, Mom said, her voice sharp. We need an answer by Friday. Your father has to call the advisor. I grabbed my purse, my hands fumbling with the clasp. I'll call you, I managed. And then I was out the door, the cool evening air a shock against my flushed skin. Driving home, the anger churned in my gut, hot and fierce. They didn't see it as my money. They saw it as a resource, available for their use, a communal pot that I, the dutiful daughter, was obligated to contribute to. The casual way they'd spoken about my carefully guarded savings, the implication that they had a right to it, that they'd been monitoring it, it was infuriating. And the sheer audacity of their demand. I spent the next few days in a haze of disbelief and simmering rage. I couldn't bring myself to call them back. Every time I thought about it, that word, family money, would claw its way back into my mind. It was an entitlement, a presumption that my life, my choices, my hard-earned achievements were somehow extensions of their will, their plans. I tried to talk to my friend Chloe about it. She listened patiently over overpriced lattes, her brow furrowed. That's insane, Sarah. They can't just do that. It's your money, your savings. I know, I'd practically wailed, but Mom kept saying family money, like it was some kind of obligation. And Dad was all about the family's continued prosperity. They truly believe they have a claim. Well, they don't, Chloe said firmly. Legally, it's yours. You saved it. It's in your account. Legally.
The word sparked something. I'd always been a rule follower, a good girl. But this felt like a line had been crossed, a boundary bulldozed. I looked at the condo listing again, the little virtual tour playing on my laptop. It was perfect. Small, yes, but with a tiny balcony overlooking a park, hardwood floors, and a kitchen I could actually cook in. It was the symbol of my independence, my carefully crafted future. The thought of them draining that future for their investments, whatever they were, made me feel physically ill. I avoided them. I let calls go to voicemail.
I sent terse texts. The tension in the family group chat became palpable. My Aunt Carol, ever the peacemaker, tried to mediate, her messages filled with gentle nudges and thinly veiled criticisms of my stubbornness. Then came the email from my parents' lawyer. Not my lawyer, their lawyer. It was a formal request, phrased in polite but firm legal language, outlining their proposed family investment initiative and requesting my participation by way of a significant capital contribution from my personal savings. It mentioned interfamilial financial planning and shared future security. It was a legal document, confirming their intent, dressed up in familial jargon. I stared at the email, my hands trembling. This wasn't just a misguided request anymore. This was a formal, calculated move. They weren't just asking, they were trying to leverage their authority, their position as my parents, to seize control of my money. The feeling of humiliation washed over me, the sting of being treated like a child, like a pawn in their financial game. The pride I had felt in my savings, in my independence, curdled into a bitter resentment. They wanted my money? They wanted to control what was mine? Fine, maybe it was time I stopped being the good daughter. Maybe it was time I showed them the meaning of legally owned. I closed my laptop, the screen reflecting my own grim determination. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to fight, and I was going to make sure they understood, in no uncertain terms, that my $75,000 was mine, every single penny, and that their claim to it was, in every sense of the word, entirely illegitimate. The rain finally started to fall outside, a heavy, insistent drumming against the window pane, mirroring the storm that was brewing inside me. I knew what I had to do. It wasn't about the condo anymore. It was about something far more fundamental. It was about reclaiming myself, my agency, my right to my own life. And the first step was understanding the law and how it applied to my perfectly legitimate, legally owned savings. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. A lawyer, a good one, someone who specialized in tricky family matters. This was going to be a long conversation.
My parents, my dad in particular, always had this way of talking about wealth, not just their own, but wealth in general, as if it were a tangible, almost sentient entity. It wasn't just money. It was assets, holdings, portfolio diversification. They'd watch CNBC religiously, not for stock tips, but for the pronouncements of some guru on the screen who would confirm their worldview. For them, money was a game of accumulating, of strategically placing pieces on a grand chessboard, and everyone in the family was supposed to be a player, or at least a willing pawn. I was always too literal for their abstract financial musings. I saw dollars and cents, transactions, and the tangible security they represented. My $75,000 was an escape route, a down payment, a promise of a quiet life built on my own hard work. Their $75,000, and by extension mine, was a strategic maneuver, a move in a much larger unseen game. When I saw the lawyer's email, a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air snaked down my spine. It wasn't just a request anymore. It was a declaration, a formalized claim, couched in legalese, on my money. They'd escalated. They'd brought in the big guns, their lawyer, to make their demand official. The humiliation of that was almost as potent as the anger, to be treated with such blatant disregard, as if my personal finances were a communal bank account for their disposal. They spoke of family investment initiatives and shared future security, as if I were some minor shareholder who needed to be brought in line. The phrase interfamilial financial planning landed like a punch to the gut. It sounded so official, so benevolent, but it was a thinly veiled attempt to exert control. They were using their authority as parents, their perceived seniority in the game of wealth, to strong-arm me. I remembered my conversation with Chloe. Legally, it's yours, she'd said. That word, legally, had resonated then, a small spark of defiance. Now it felt like a blazing inferno. I wasn't going to be a pawn. I wasn't going to be a piece moved around their board. I was going to be a player too, but on my own terms, with my own rules. I called the lawyer Chloe had recommended.
Her name was Evelyn Reed, and her firm had a reputation for handling complex, often contentious, estate and family disputes. The receptionist put me through, and Evelyn's voice, calm and professional, was a welcome anchor in my rising tide of emotion. I explained the situation, the demand, the family money narrative, the lawyer's email. As I spoke, the tremor in my voice subsided, replaced by a steely resolve. Evelyn listened intently, interjecting only with clarifying questions. "And this $75,000, she asked, her tone measured. "Is it solely in an account under your name?" "Yes," I confirmed, my voice firm. "Every penny. I opened a high-yield savings account specifically for this down payment years ago."
I've been contributing to it consistently from my salary, and I've tracked every deposit and withdrawal meticulously. There's no joint ownership, no access for anyone else. It's mine. "And you have documentation?" "Of course," I said, a touch of defensiveness creeping in. Bank statements, transaction records, even a little ledger I kept when I was younger, detailing where every dollar came from. "I'm not careless with my money, Evelyn. That's why it's so insulting they think they can just take it." "I understand," Evelyn said, and I could hear the subtle shift in her tone, the acknowledgement that this wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. "Your parents are using a common tactic, albeit a legally flimsy one, to apply pressure. The idea of family money is often an emotional appeal, not a legal one, unless there are specific trusts or legal agreements in place that dictate otherwise. From what you've described, that doesn't appear to be the case here." We talked for almost an hour. She walked me through the potential legal pathways, explaining the difference between moral claims and enforceable rights. She advised me to gather all my financial records, to be prepared for a protracted battle if they refuse to back down. "They may be counting on you being intimidated by their lawyer or by the idea of a legal fight," she said. "Your advantage is that you have concrete proof of ownership. And frankly, their claim, based on your description, sounds like wishful thinking and entitlement rather than legal standing." As the conversation ended, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. I had a plan. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was actively engaging. The humiliation had been a catalyst, stripping away my naivete and leaving behind a hard, sharp core of determination. The family money narrative had always been a tool of their control, a way to infantilize me, to keep me indebted and dependent. Now, I was turning it back on them. The following week was a tightrope walk. I maintained a polite but distant demeanor with my parents, letting their calls go to voicemail, responding to texts with brief, non-committal answers. The silence from my end was deafening to them. I could feel it. Their attempts at normalcy, at charming me back into submission, were transparent and grating. Mom would send pictures of flowers from her garden, Dad would share articles about the stock market's performance, all veiled attempts to get me to engage, to open the door to that conversation again. I didn't bite. I was too busy. I was digging, not just into my own finances, but into theirs. If they were so keen on family investments and future security, I wanted to know what that looked like for them. What were their actual assets? What were their liabilities? Evelyn had subtly encouraged this line of inquiry, framing it as understanding the full financial picture.
It felt like I was playing detective in my own family's history, uncovering secrets I never imagined. It started with old tax returns, which I'd helped them organize a few years back. I'd kept digital copies, a habit born from my own meticulous record-keeping. Then I accessed our shared family drive, a cloud storage account my parents set up years ago for photos and important documents. It was a treasure trove, filled with scanned deeds, old wills, investment statements from decades past, even private correspondence between my parents. They'd been so casual about sharing access, never imagining I'd use it for anything other than retrieving vacation photos. What I found was illuminating, and frankly, a little terrifying. Their financial security wasn't quite as robust as they projected. There was a mortgage on their primary residence, larger than I'd anticipated for people who'd been retired for years. Their retirement accounts, while substantial, were heavily leveraged. And then there were the diversified ventures Mom had vaguely alluded to. These weren't the prudent, well-managed investments they presented to the world. They were speculative, high-risk ventures, some of which had clearly failed spectacularly, leaving behind substantial debt. There was a venture capital fund, started with a significant chunk of their savings about 10 years ago, that had imploded. The paperwork was dense, filled with acronyms I barely understood, but the bottom line was clear. It was a massive loss. My parents had sunk not just their liquid assets, but also taken out a significant loan against their home to fund it. There were also a series of smaller, more personal loans, some to friends, some to who knew. The amounts varied, but they added up. It wasn't just my $75,000 they were after. It was a Hail Mary. They were in a far more precarious financial position than I or anyone else had realized. Their projected secure future was a carefully constructed illusion, a facade of prosperity built on a shaky foundation of debt and failed gambles. The humiliation I felt was morphing, twisting into something colder, something more calculating. They hadn't just asked for my money, they had needed it, and they were willing to lie, to manipulate, to exploit their own daughter to get it. The emotional intensity of part one, the raw anger and disbelief, was now being overlaid with a layer of icy clarity. I saw them not as loving, if misguided parents, but as individuals deeply in over their heads, desperately trying to maintain an image of success they no longer possessed. The family money concept wasn't just about entitlement, it was about their fear. Fear of admitting failure, fear of losing face, fear of the reality of their financial situation. One evening, while sifting through scanned documents, I stumbled upon a series of emails from my father to a financial advisor, dating back about 18 months. The tone was frantic, desperate.
He was asking about loan consolidation, about borrowing against assets they didn't seem to have, about ways to access capital quickly. There was a particularly damning exchange where he essentially begged the advisor for options, for anything to stop the bleeding, as he put it. The advisor's replies were polite but firm, outlining the grim reality of their debt load and the lack of viable collateral. This discovery was a turning point. It solidified my understanding of their desperation. It wasn't about wanting more. It was about preventing ruin. And my $75,000, which I had viewed as a down payment on my future, was to them a lifeline for their present. The audacity of their request now felt less like a misguided familial demand and more like a calculated gamble on my compassion and my lack of understanding of their true financial straits. The humiliation of their initial demand, the sting of being called selfish, now felt like a distant memory. It was replaced by a quiet, burning fury. They had underestimated me. They had assumed I was still the naive daughter who would cave under pressure, who would prioritize familial harmony over her own hard-earned security. They had no idea what I now knew. I decided it was time for a confrontation. Not a shouting match, not an emotional plea, but a calm, direct presentation of facts. I scheduled a meeting with Evelyn and my parents. I told them I wanted to discuss their family investment initiative and finalize my contribution. I invited them to my apartment, a small, neutral space, far from the comforting pot roast-scented familiarity of their home. I wanted to be on my own territory, in the space that was mine. The evening arrived, cool and crisp, the air carrying the scent of fallen leaves. My parents walked in, Mom with a forced, bright smile, Dad with that familiar air of paternal authority, albeit a little frayed around the edges. Evelyn was already there, a picture of professional calm, seated at my small dining table. I'd laid out copies of my financial records, my meticulously organized savings history, alongside printed copies of my parents' problematic financial documents, the debt statements, the failed investment reports, the desperate emails. Mom, Dad, I began, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Thank you for coming. Evelyn is here to help us finalize the details of my contribution to your investment plan. Mom's smile widened. Oh, Sarah, darling, we're so relieved you've come around. Your father and I were so worried you were being difficult. Dad nodded, a triumphant glint in his eye. It's for the best, Sarah. Family sticks together, especially when it comes to securing our future. I took a deep breath. Actually, Dad, I've been doing some research. Evelyn helped me understand things a lot better, and I've been reviewing our family's financial situation. I gestured to the papers spread on the table.
My $75,000 is my savings. It's my down payment, my security. It's legally mine, and I'm not investing it in anything that isn't financially sound. Which brings me to this. I picked up one of the printed emails from my father to the financial advisor. Dad, I found this, and other documents. It seems your investment plan isn't quite the sure thing you presented it as. In fact, it looks like you're in significant debt. That venture capital fund, it was a disaster, wasn't it? And you borrowed heavily against the house to fund it. You're talking about securing the family's future, but your own future and the family home seems to be on shaky ground. The color drained from my mother's face. Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief, then dawning horror. Dad's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing, the jovial paternal mask cracking and falling away to reveal a raw, exposed panic. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. "Where did you get these papers?" "They were in the family drive, Dad," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "The one you set up for important documents. I suppose you didn't anticipate I'd be looking for them. You didn't anticipate that I'd be fighting for my own money, or that I'd want to understand what I was being asked to contribute to." Evelyn spoke them, her voice calm but carrying the weight of legal authority. "Sarah's savings are legally her own. Any investment requires her full consent and understanding of the risks involved. Based on the information Sarah has uncovered, her $75,000 would be a significant risk if invested in the ventures you've outlined, particularly given your current financial obligations." My mother stood up abruptly, her hands fluttering nervously. "This is a misunderstanding. Sarah, darling, you don't understand the complexities. Your father and I have always made prudent decisions." "Prudent decisions?" I cut her off, the years of suppressed frustration bubbling to the surface. "Mom, you called my savings family money. You tried to guilt me into giving it up, into believing it was my obligation. You presented a false narrative of financial security to hide the fact that you're in trouble. You don't want my money to invest. You want it to bail yourselves out." The air in the small apartment grew thick with unspoken accusations. My mother looked at me, her eyes wide and glistening, not with tears of remorse, but with a desperate, cornered fear. My father remained frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and growing anger. "You think you can just walk in here and accuse us?" he spat, his voice laced with venom. "After everything we've done for you, given you a home and education?" "And I'm grateful for that," I said, my voice dangerously low. "But that doesn't give you the right to my future. That doesn't give you a claim on my hard-earned money. You asked for a contribution, and I'm giving you one. I'm contributing the truth."
Your investment initiative is a desperate attempt to stave off financial ruin, and I'm not going to be a casualty of your failed gambles. I pushed the stack of documents towards them, my hand shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer, raw intensity of the moment. "This is what you're investing in, Mom. This is the reality. My $75,000 is mine, and if you try to claim it, legally, I will fight you. Because that money represents my independence, and I will not let you take it away." My mother let out a small, choked sob. My father stood rigid, his face ashen, the illusion of control shattered. Evelyn watched them, her expression unreadable, a silent witness to the implosion of familial pretense. The silence that descended was heavy, suffocating, broken only by the distant hum of traffic outside and the frantic beat of my own heart. I had laid bare their secrets, their desperation, and in doing so, I had irrevocably changed the dynamic. The game had shifted, and they were no longer the only players who knew the stakes. The look on their faces, a mixture of shock, humiliation, and a dawning realization of their own vulnerability, was more satisfying than any money could ever be. It was the look of people who had finally understood that their little girl had grown up, and she was no longer playing by their rules. The cliffhanger was their silence, their stunned, defeated silence, and the terrifying uncertainty of what they would do next. The silence in my apartment stretched, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by the ticking of my kitchen clock, each second a tiny hammer blow to the fragile remnants of my parents' composure. Mom was staring at the papers, her eyes wide and unfocused, as if the numbers and words were a foreign language she couldn't comprehend. Dad, usually so quick with a retort, so full of bluster, was a statue of disbelief, his face drained of color, his mouth slightly agape. Evelyn, ever the professional, remained seated, her gaze calmly sweeping over them, her presence a quiet but undeniable testament to the gravity of the situation. This was it, the moment of reckoning I'd both dreaded and anticipated. The humiliation they dished out so freely had been a slow burn, but this was a conflagration. They had seen themselves as the architects of their financial empire, the benevolent benefactors of their family's future. Now, they were exposed as desperate gamblers, their empire a house of cards about to tumble. Mom finally stirred, her voice barely a whisper. "Sarah, I don't understand. Those debts,
the losses. Her hands trembled as she reached for a document, a report detailing the catastrophic collapse of the venture capital fund. We thought it was a temporary setback, a minor hiccup. A hiccup, Mom? I echoed, the words laced with a bitterness I hadn't realized I'd been holding on to for so long. This is a full-blown disaster. You leveraged the house.
You took out personal loans. You were begging a financial advisor for help. This isn't a hiccup, it's a free fall. Dad finally found his voice, a hoarse, ragged sound. This is an invasion of privacy. You have no right to go through our private documents. You invited me to contribute to your family investment initiative, Dad, I replied, my voice still steady, though a tremor ran through my hand as I reached for my own glass of water. And I decided to do my due diligence. Evelyn explained it to me. If you're asking me to invest my money, I have a right to know where it's going and what the real financial standing of the initiative is. Turns out, the initiative is your debt, and you wanted my savings to prop it up. He flinched, a visible reaction to the blunt truth. It's not like that. We had a plan, a way to recover. This $75,000 would have been the seed money. It would have turned everything around. Turned what around, Dad? I pressed. Your image? Your pride? You called me selfish. You threatened me with legal action, all because I wouldn't hand over my down payment for a house I've worked years for, to bail out your reckless decisions that seem to have put our family home at risk. Mom's face crumpled. Tears began to stream down her cheeks. Not the dramatic, attention-seeking tears she'd sometimes shed, but quiet, profound tears of despair. We didn't want to worry you, Sarah. We thought we could fix it before you ever needed to know. Your father, he felt so responsible. We got in too deep. So you lied to me, I stated, not as an accusation, but as a simple, irrefutable fact. You lied about the family's financial health. You lied about the purpose of this investment. You manipulated me. Dad finally pushed himself away from the table, pacing the small living room like a caged animal. You're being dramatic, Sarah. This is about family, about supporting each other. You're turning your back on us. No, Dad, I said, my voice hardening. I'm not turning my back on you. I'm refusing to be dragged down with you. Your family support has always come with strings attached, with expectations, with a price tag for my autonomy. This time, the price was too high. And the truth is, you didn't want my support. You wanted my money to cover your mistakes. Evelyn cleared her throat softly. As I've explained, Sarah's $75,000 is legally hers. There are no joint accounts, no trusts, no agreements that obligate her to contribute it to your personal ventures, especially when those ventures are demonstrably high risk and financially unstable. Furthermore, any attempt to coerce or legally claim these funds would be met with significant opposition and likely legal repercussions for your actions. My parents looked at Evelyn, their desperation now tinged with a new fear, the fear of legal consequence. They had likely expected to intimidate me with their lawyer. They hadn't anticipated me having one who was already armed with the truth of their precarious situation. So what? Dad's voice was strained. You're just going to leave us to lose everything? I'm going to secure my own future, I said, my gaze meeting his directly. The future you always lectured me about safeguarding. The future you seem determined to jeopardize with your own actions. I've spent years building this $75,000. It's not just money. It's proof that I can do it on my own, without relying on family investments that are clearly a smokescreen for your financial woes. Mom looked at me, her face a mixture of sorrow and a dawning, reluctant understanding. We thought we were doing the right thing, protecting our legacy, for you. Your legacy, Mom, I said, my voice softening slightly, is not just about wealth. It's about integrity and honesty, and that's what you've both jeopardized. You wanted me to play the game by your rules, but I've realized your game is rigged, and I'm not playing anymore. I'm building my own. The air crackled with unspoken words, with years of buried resentments and unmet expectations. The humiliation they had inflicted had curdled into something potent, leverage. I held their secret, their vulnerability, in my hands, and the power in that knowledge was almost intoxicating. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, I continued, my voice resonating with a newfound strength. I'm not looking for a hug or an apology. I'm stating my position. That $75,000 is mine, and I will do whatever is legally necessary to protect it. If you want to try and claim it,
Evelyn will be here to represent me. But I sincerely hope you won't, because the alternative, the public exposure of your financial situation, the potential loss of your home, that's a far greater humiliation than anything you ever inflicted on me." Dad scoffed, but there was no conviction in it. "You think you can just dictate terms to us?" "I'm not dictating terms," I countered. "I'm setting boundaries. Boundaries that you crossed when you tried to take what is mine. And if those boundaries mean you lose access to me or to any financial support I might have considered offering in a healthier situation, then so be it. My independence is paramount, and you will not compromise it." Mom looked at me, her eyes finally meeting mine with a flicker of something other than fear. Perhaps it was pride, buried deep beneath layers of disappointment and regret. We need time to think, Sarah. Take all the time you need," I said. "But understand this. The ball is in your court. You can continue down this path, clinging to your pride and your illusions, and face the consequences. Or you can accept the reality, deal with your debts responsibly, and perhaps over time, we can rebuild some semblance of trust. But my money, it's off the table. Permanently."
I stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. Evelyn rose with me. "I'll be in touch regarding any formal communication," she said to my parents, her voice calm and businesslike. They remained seated, figures of dejection and defeat. Mom looked lost. Dad's jaw was set in a hard, determined line, but the fire in his eyes had been replaced by a weary resignation. As Evelyn and I walked towards the door, I glanced back at them. They were still my parents, the people who had brought me into this world, but they were no longer the figures of absolute authority and wisdom I had once perceived them to be. They were flawed, desperate individuals, and I was no longer their pawn. The walk to my car was silent. The cool night air felt like a cleansing balm. I unlocked the door and sank into the driver's seat, the familiar scent of leather and my own perfume a comfort. I didn't immediately start the engine. Instead, I just sat there, letting the enormity of what had just happened wash over me. The humiliation, the anger, the fear, they had all coalesced into a quiet, steady resolve. The power had shifted, not through shouting or threats, but through knowledge, through preparation, and through a simple, unwavering assertion of my own rights. They had tried to exert control through emotional manipulation and the illusion of familial obligation. I had countered with facts, with legal backing, and with the undeniable truth of their own precarious financial state. I thought about the years of subtle digs, of condescending remarks, of the implicit message that I was never quite good enough, never quite as financially savvy as they were. They had always held the purse strings, always positioned themselves as the gatekeepers of financial security. And now, in a bizarre twist of fate, their own recklessness had given me the ultimate leverage. I turned the key, the engine rumbling to life, a sound that felt like a victory anthem. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I didn't feel triumph, not exactly. It was more a profound sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction that came from standing my ground and refusing to be broken. The emotional intensity of the evening had been draining, but the release was profound. I had faced my demons, not with anger, but with calculated composure, and I had emerged not unscathed, but undeniably whole. The road ahead was still uncertain. My relationship with my parents was undoubtedly fractured, perhaps beyond repair. There would be fallout, awkward holidays, lingering resentments, but I had reclaimed a fundamental piece of myself, my autonomy, my future. That $75,000 wasn't just a down payment anymore. It was a symbol of my strength, a testament to my resilience. It was the foundation of a life built on my own terms, free from the suffocating expectations and manipulative tactics of those who had once claimed to love me unconditionally, but had, in the end, only sought to control me.
The silence in the car was no longer heavy. It was the quiet hum of possibility, the sound of a life finally unfolding on my own terms.